a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Second Amendment.
Second Amendment, the worst written amendment in the Constitution.
Now, you said you had a friend argument with?
So, when we still lived in the apartment before we bought our house, the bus stop was out in front of the complex, and any parent who had kids in the school who rode the bus, we all met in one place out in front of the apartment complex. And you get to talking with the other parents because there weren't that many of them, so you got to know them fairly well. And I don't remember how the Second Amendment even came up, but I think we were talking about guns in the home or something, and the dad of this girl who rode the school bus was complaining about how people didn't want him to have a gun in his home just because he had a kid, which, I'm with them on that. And he was going on and on about his constitutional right. I said, well, are you in a well-regulated militia? And he said, what? I said, are you in a well-regulated militia? He says, what do you mean? I said, well, that's the first clause in the Second Amendment. He says to me, when did they add that? 1791? Like, it's always been there. And the problem is this amendment is written so badly, that it's impossible to determine fully what it means. Because it's taken in modern day to mean that anybody can have whatever gun they want to in their house.
I have the right to have a nuclear missile in my house.
Yeah. Like, I have talked to people who fully believe that you should not have any limitation on what weapons you're allowed to own. And that is madness. Like, can you imagine how neighborhood arguments would escalate if that were the case? World War III would come from somebody stepping on someone else's lawn.
And I think I mentioned this before, the last one, but not the last one, but the last time we did this, that plus the content at the time too. Back then, a lot of people, their gun was their life. They get to survive for food, to protect them, to really protect themselves.
Yeah, the thing is the way the country looked in 1791 was very different from how it looks today. And there was a lot more subsistence hunting. And there was a lot more, I am protecting my family from wild animals. Like, for all of the jokes about the wild boars thing a few years ago, feral pigs are actually a pretty serious danger. And if you lived in the country, your family could be in danger.
And we talked about the Native American before. They could be a threat to.
Yeah. I mean, that's,
We probably did threat first, but they could be a threat back.
Oh, we definitely did the threat first. But if you are, random person in a cabin in the Kentucky wilderness, you don't care who started it. You care about, can I keep my family from being killed? And, like, we could get into the rights and wrongs of that whole situation.
Yeah,
but the founding fathers didn't.
Of course, back then, I think this is still musket ball territory where you take a while to load one or two shots.
Yeah, the weapons being used, the arms available in the late 18th century were very, very limited. And even then, I don't think anyone would have been that thrilled with the idea of some random dude owning a cannon.
Yeah. See, I think we were pre-rifle, but we were post matchlock. We were the flintlock age.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I think pretty much all, but this is another place where we come across, I'm just not an expert on this, but I'm pretty sure that there weren't even, like, breech-loading weapons. I think we were all still in muzzle-loading at the time. And
where you put the gunpowder down, and you pound it down with a stick.
Yeah. And, Little House in the Big Woods is set well after this point, because Laura Ingalls Wilder lived into the, like, 1950s.
You know, I read all those books.
Oh yeah, I did too. And there's a scene in Little House in the Big Woods where Laura is watching her father make lead shot, like, by hand at home. And that was, you know.
Yeah, I was amazed. Sorry, off topic again, but I was amazed that only one or two of those books was actually about the show. The other ones was a prequel and sequel and other stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is her autobiography, sort of. Her daughter did a lot of abridging, and they left a lot of stuff out. And sorry, my partner's just coming through the room. You know, like, she had a brother who doesn't appear in the books, and there's a lot I could say about her father. But the point is, you know, that's 150 years after this amendment was written, and he's still making lead shot at home. Now, rifles did exist, and he did own a rifle, but it was still fairly common to, instead of buying your shot, to make it at home if you lived in the wilderness. So, yeah. You know, the weapons that were available were extraordinarily different. And there was no standing army. So the well-regulated militia part, that was, we need to have a military, and our military is, you know, like 95%, we call up random guys when we need a military. So, in an era where and, you know, when you were in the military, you provided your own weapon most of the time. So in an era where you couldn't just call up troops, a well-regulated militia was, all of the guys in town had shooting practice once a week to make sure that if the British invaded, they'd be ready. You know, it's a very different situation.
Now, Melissa, is that, I mean, a federal, or we're talking about state level militias here?
It was still state level. You know, it's not militia like the Michigan militia where it's a bunch of random dudes out in the woods. It was much more organized than that. And it was considered to be under the authority of the government as needed. You know, this was people who could be called up by the government if the government needed troops to be called up. But nobody was paying for a standing army at this point.
When do you know when we got our first standing army besides the Continental Army we had?
Oh gosh. No, but I'm looking it up real quick.
I mean, it had to be pre-1812 for that.
Yeah. You know, because we had Fort McHenry. The Continental Army was formed on... So the United States Army is considered to have formed on the 3rd of June, 1784. And the current U.S. Army considers itself to be a continuation of the Continental Army. from 1775. Blah, 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 disbanded. State militias became the new thing. The regular army was really started in about 1792.
So about a year after this.
Yeah. But there wasn't much of it, and it only really started expanding in 1808. And then the military, as we know it, is a relative. It's a relic of World War II. Even before World War II, the United States Army was extremely small, given the size of the country.
You know, I was looking up stuff earlier. Like, I found out there's the army, and then there's armies inside the big army.
Yeah, and it's all how the military gets divided, and if you study Civil War history, which, as you know, I have done, you get things like the Army of the Potomac, where the army as a whole is divided by what part of the conflict they're fighting. And we still use that to a lesser extent. It's much more standardized now. So a brigade is going to have roughly the same number of guys today, whereas it wouldn't have necessarily 150 years ago. But this amendment was not, I should be allowed to have my very own bazooka. This was, I should be able to go hunting, protect my family, and help fight if the government needs people to help fight.
Yep,
that was the original intent of this.
Being necessary.
And now,
I remember it says being necessary to security of a free state.
Yeah, like we can't have a free state without people willing to fight for it. Ergo, the people who would be there to fight for it can have guns. And as established, I am not an originalist. I despise that principle. But I think it's relevant here because it explains the level of keeping and bearing arms that was being talked about. It was not a free license to have whatever you want, and therefore people should be able to have whatever they want. And I think in the modern era, reasonable gun control is essential. I got a YouTube ad, I think it was YouTube, yesterday with the mom of one of the kids from Sandy Hook talking about how many times her son got shot.
I forget if I mentioned this earlier in this, either on the podcast or in our talk, but I believe earlier this year the survivors graduated.
Yeah.
That's how long it's been since then.
And we have not substantially increased the protections for children in schools. They've just this school year built a new lock and unlock door for my daughter's school. But if I wanted to get into that school, there are ways that I could do it.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure there was before. There's lots of students before us too, but I think I just missed the Columbine thing by 1 year. So I was 1 year graduated before the Columbine happened. So all this, they really, I don't think they really had that much restrictions until then. I mean, there probably was some, but I
Yeah, I
just
mean,
missed the big restrictions that started happening after Columbine.
yeah, school shootings go back a ways. They don't really the way we picture them today. Um, but they do, in general, go back quite a long time. But the first real school shooting, as we picture school shootings, was Columbine, which I was in college for. And then it became clear that this was a thing that was going to keep happening. And that's when school architecture started to change.
Yeah.
Um,
I think after that, also some music parks started doing metal detectors to get in there
yeah,
too.
yeah. I was visiting my son's first grade class before he started school, and there was a big red lockdown button in my son's first grade classroom. There was someone in the comments of Bad Science Sunday the other day telling me that he didn't want me to be afraid. And I was like, are you kidding me? I have 2 children in the public schools. I'm afraid all the time. We've had a lockdown threat in my school. It turned out to be a hoax. Somebody calling in a fake bomb notice, but it happened.
Yeah. See, I think between Columbine and Sandy Hook, there is Virginia Tech, the college one.
Yeah, there were a bunch of them between Columbine and Sandy Hook.
But I just remember that one that one stood out to me the most for some reason. I was at the hospital that day for my mom, or maybe with my dad. I forget. I was at the hospital for some reason, but it was on the news at the hospital, the Virginia Tech thing.
Yeah.
High school, college, and elementary school.
Yeah.
School schooling can happen all ages.
Yeah, it's bad enough that Wikipedia's list of school-related attacks divides it by primary, secondary, and post-secondary. And then you can get, just looking at United States, you can get before 2000, 2000 to present, and by death toll. The first attack on a school in the United States was in 1764, and it really doesn't match in any way because it was I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but Lenape. 4 Lenape entered the school and killed the teacher and 10 students.
But by one person?
Well, 4 Native Americans.
Oh,
killed.
okay. I was gonna say if they used those like they would have to not make a joke about this or anything, but they would have to loading the gun, one person loading a gun every 2 minutes, the kids would have to stand there watching the whole time. Well,
only the teacher was shot. The others were clubbed.
Okay, that makes more sense. That makes more sense.
But you get incidents going back, as far as the 1840s that are someone gets shot at school.
Like I said, these were until recently, maybe until the 1800s. These were one bullet per gun thing, not the guns we have today.
And some of these were accidents. Huh. There was one in Santa Monica, California in 1881. That's surprising. Um, yeah, the first one I see that has multiple victims is 1891. Double-barreled shotgun fired into a mixed audience of black and white students, parents, and teachers.
Yeah, that was. Now we're in the thing of multiple guns that can hold multiple shots at this point.
Well, in a double-barreled shotgun, he's probably firing whoever it was, because they never found the guy, was probably firing like birdshot or something, buckshot. Nobody was actually killed. It's 1898 is the first one that has multiple, or sorry, 1893 is the first one that has multiple deaths, and that was a fight. I guess there was one in 1867, but that looks like a fight that kind of went on. Yeah. A few of these are like, one person was killed and then someone came back and killed another person. But it's not until the 1890s that you start getting multiple people killed all at once. And the first one that's, a major number of people. Oh, yeah, South Pasadena, California. That's where Halloween was filmed. And it's right across the border from where I went to high school. 5 people killed in 1940. And then you're still in nobody killed, 1 person killed, so forth until the 1960s. And then the most deadly one that we get for quite some time is in Austin, Texas. And there's a very good documentary about it. A 25-year-old engineering student with a who might have had a brain tumor shot and killed 15 people and wounded 31 more in an hour and a half.
Where's the cocoa?
I don't think.
Hey,
and it's the most deadly school shooting until Virginia Tech in 2007. So even through the 70s, you're getting a couple of people. And it's only starting with Columbine that you're getting these large death tolls.
Plus the more internet and news broadcast of them too.
Yeah. There's one in Stockton, California in 1989 that 6 people were killed and 32 were injured. And they were children. They were the children of refugees. There's also a bombing incident in, let me find it again, 1986. 2 people died, 74 injured when a bomb went off. It was a former town marshal and his wife taking people hostage. Most of the big ones were, before a certain point, were bombings. And we limit what you can have in the way of bombs. We go out of our way to try to keep people from having access to bomb-making materials because we recognize that that is a danger to public safety. But apparently, these guns are not because something Second Amendment. And I would argue that if bombs the way we know them had existed in 1789, there would have been a certain amount of freedom to own bombs simply because that would be another military you know, weapon.
Yeah.
So the Second Amendment is really mostly about, hey, we should have an army. And it gets used these days as you should have whatever gun you want. And any even sensible gun regulation is often taken to be a Second Amendment violation. And that's infuriating.
Like the waiting 5 days to get a gun thing.
You know, Homer Simpson, you know, but I'm angry now. But, you know, years ago now, we had an amendment, we had an initiative on our ballot that would have worked to close some of the possible loopholes about things like waiting periods and background checks. And I got a push poll from, I'm certain, the NRA on the subject. And it asked if I wanted to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous, mentally ill people. And I did not yell at the person who was giving me this poll, because I'm sure the person giving me this poll was just doing a job. You know, they might have been a volunteer, but I doubt it. So I didn't yell at that person. But number one, I am a mentally ill person. So, yes, I shouldn't have a gun. But it's because I'm in more danger of using it on myself. Rates of self-harm go way, way up if there's a gun in the home. So no, mentally ill people shouldn't have easy access to guns because it'll lower the rate of self-harm. Number two, mentally ill people are actually more likely to be victims of violent crime than the general population, and less likely to be perpetrators of violent crime than the general population. So mentally ill people are not the danger here. We are in danger from mentally healthy people. And number three, exactly how are you planning to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous mentally ill people without background checks? But, you know, these are all things that I did not say to the person on the other end of the phone call. But I do think of all of the articles in the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment is the one most in need of amending itself. If nothing else, we should fix the grammar so that it says what we want it to say.
But good luck doing that now.
Oh yeah, no. It's not going to happen. There's no way. Frustratingly, the people who are most opposed to any touching of the Second Amendment are the ones who would like to ignore the First Amendment, which is much more clear about what it's doing.
I think there was what YouTuber that said, "I'll protect my Second Amendment." So one of those, I forget who it was, but it was one of the crazy guys that said, "I'll protect my First Amendment right with my Second Amendment."
Yeah. Except historically, that has never been how we do things in this country. You know, you can't protect your First Amendment right against the government with a gun, because the government has more and bigger guns.
Yeah, I forget who it was, but he was the guy who he tricked Starbucks by saying Merry Christmas, by telling his name was Merry Christmas in the Starbucks cup or something like that.
Yeah. No, there are a lot of people who are of that stance. I've seen T-shirts. In Western Washington, I have seen T-shirts saying, I protect my First Amendment rights with my Second Amendment rights. And it's like, no, you don't. No, you think you do, but you don't. And I think this amendment is in serious need of overhaul. I think it's in serious need of limitation. And I think, at best, we should amend it so it says exactly what we mean it to say. because vanishingly few people are of the opinion that you, as a private citizen, are entitled to your very own nuclear weapons. There are some, I've heard them, but I don't know if they really believe that in practice. And I think even there are a lot more of the, well, I should be able to, but not you who don't believe the same thing as I do. So I'm not necessarily saying we abolish the Second Amendment. Because, well, for one thing, that would never pass.
Yeah. Or we just go back in time and have them rewrite the words that make sense in modern times.
Yeah. Be like, look, guys, here's what you need to do. How about we phrase it this way so that it actually says what you mean?
How would you write it if you were back then? And you were a woman that could have you had voice in the
well,
Congress.
I think I would probably say the right of the people to keep and bear arms for the purpose of a well-regulated militia, which is necessary to the security of a free state, shall not be infringed. Even just adding, this is what these guns are for, which is, again, 90% of what they probably meant.
You know, I think you almost did the same thing on here, but you rearranged. You did the rearranging of the clause.
Well, the well-regulated militia part is not adequately tied in to the freedom. It almost feels like a run-on sentence the way it is now. I mean, grammatically, it is a run-on sentence, but what I mean is more these thoughts don't feel connected. It doesn't feel as though we are saying that you should be able to have guns because of the militia or, whatever. It feels like we feel like we should have a militia and we feel like you should have guns, and we're going to put that in one sentence without saying what they have to do with one another.
Yeah, I think a lot of people skip the first part and they go to the second part.
Yeah. The thing is it doesn't say in the First Amendment that you get to have guns for personal protection. Or even for hunting, even though, I'd be shocked if any of the Founding Fathers said, no, you can't have a gun for hunting. But all it says is the well-regulated militia bit, and that's the part that we ignore. Like, yeah, okay, the right shall not be infringed. Okay, I understand that seems really clear. And arguably it is. But the why does kind of matter. And also, there's no possible way they could have foreseen the kind of weapons that we have available now. Again, I'm not a gun expert by any stretch. How fast can you reload? Can you reload a muzzle loader? It takes anywhere between 20 seconds and 2 minutes, depending on what you're firing and how accurate you feel like being, to load and fire a muzzle loader. And they weren't all that accurate at the best of times.
Are these present day ones or back then ones?
Well, I mean, this is done using historical weapons.
Okay. So
I know people who are part of black powder groups. I don't think any guns made for modern use are muzzle loaders. Like, I could be wrong there, feel free to prove me wrong, but it's obsolete tech, and it's only done by, weirdo historical reenactors. Not that I know anyone like that. Alternately, it's like 3/4 of my friends group. Either you're a film nerd, you're an anti-evolution nerd, or you're a historical reenactor nerd, and there is definite overlap in those three groups.
So, is there any? We talked about the court case for First Amendment, the Madison one. Is there a court case any Supreme Court case that you know of that's affected this one or affected?
Oh, there's been a lot. What right the government has to regulate guns is a huge issue of controversy. There have been many Supreme Court cases about it, mostly recently. In the past, up until about the 80s, I want to say, the Supreme Court cases found on the side of, yes, gun control is a thing. And it's only been in, really, my lifetime that the Supreme Court has gotten a lot more radical on the subject of, no, nobody can limit your guns. And there's a whole thing about, can the District of Columbia ban handguns? And technically no, because only Congress is allowed to do that for them. So it is a complicated issue. The Supreme Court has had many, many rulings on this subject, and it's gone wildly back and forth over the last 200 years.
All right. Anything else to bring up about this?
Nope, that's pretty much my feelings on the Second Amendment.
All right. Next time, something a little bit more simpler.
Yeah.